Now finally, again, it's the pleasure to hand the mic and the floor to Kathrin to say a couple of words on an extremely interesting and this time really ambitious project about an indicator framework for culture and democracy. So please. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, Kimmo, for giving me the floor. And I try to be short and precise because I have heard certain noises and it looks like there is a lunch or a coffee break being prepared. Indeed, I would actually prefer to react straight away to Vesna's rather provocative intervention on Compendium plus and minus and possible centralization, decentralization. And I was even thinking, would there be maybe an extraterrestrial solution to accommodate all the various interests of this project? But anyway, so now let's get back to the indicators. As Kimmo said, this is rather ambitious. This is possibly even crazy. We do it anyway. This work goes back to a decision by a ministerial conference taken in 2013, dealing with access to and governance of culture. And the ministers decided, one part of their action plan, decided that they wanted to see developed an indicator framework that would be able to assess the contribution of culture to democracy. Now, of course, this has a certain background. 2013, within our organization, the Council of Europe, there was a certain reform movement that started already somewhat earlier, refocusing on issues of democracy, human rights, and rule of law proper, meaning that interests and sectors such as social policies, cultural policies, educational policies, you name it, were maybe less center stage than the decades before. But we also lived through a time of financial crisis, and the ministries themselves were under extreme pressure, of course, to explain their budgets, to save, and to make all kinds of allocations and rationalizations within their resources policies. So an interest in the economic efficiency of financing culture was there too, and that was the second part of the request issued by the ministers. And then lastly, I mean, it's been mentioned several times before in various interventions, we always we always seemingly seek this one narrative that makes and paves the path for culture. Whether it's about sustainable development and the UN agenda, whether it is within our own organizations, whether it is within our own struggles, whether it's a foundation or an advocacy body or whatever. I mean, we seem to be all victim to the same problem, to explain why culture is good and what it really does to society. So this indicator framework on culture and democracy tries, of course, to provide some empirically tested solutions and answers to the various stakeholders. I will be now very briefly speaking about the methodology. There's, of course, papers and precise information on our website. But to give you a quick understanding of the methodology, so with the help of the Hertie School of Governance in Berlin, who is our main stakeholder and research agency in this, there was a parallel construction of the framework in a culture and a democracy dimension. And saying that this is parallel means that both these dimensions, culture and democracy, were differentiated into respective areas, political, legal, economic, and civic areas or aspects. And then hundreds of indicators were built within those two dimensions. And then the third element to the methodology, which is of course interesting, is a process or time perspective being built into that system by distinguishing input indicators, throughput indicators, and output indicators. Now, so this is the building blocks to the system, and I will now very briefly resume the progress made in 2015, following these methodological works of 2014, which you also had an occasion to understand maybe a little bit last year at our authors meeting in Brussels, when Professor Hölscher was with us and reported on these initial works. In 2015, the tests were widened, concept refined, first correlations run, more correlations run, and we were happy to find that there are rather strong correlations between the dimension of active cultural engagement and a number of democracy, so to say, impacts, like democratic openness, like political engagement, and then also well-being. That is also something which was already checked. By the end of December, we will have a delivery of the comprehensive and entire 2015 works, and this has 4 elements. The complete indicator framework, together with the methodological and statistical background paper. Then we will have results of 6 specific correlations tested, correlations between culture and democracy dimensions. And we have asked the Hertie School to concentrate on them on issues of integrative and inclusive European societies, because as we have understood, this is now a main concern for our organization as a political organization. And of course, Vesna, you can say that the Compendium or our cultural policy research work is hijacked. And it may change over time, but then again, this is probably the fate of being a political organization. We have to reply to what is happening there, what's out there, and this is the way of trying to make a specific sector contribution to the world. Now, the third element in the delivery will be 25 country summaries, so 25 country profiles, with, of course, all their detailed data, and that will be made available in an Excel or Stata format. And then lastly, fourthly, we will have a detailed proposal for an online tool, because we plan to develop an online tool for this indicator framework on culture and democracy. So this will be a distinct and precise product. We don't yet have all the details, but it will be a first proposal. And then the idea, of course, would be to link that cleverly and intelligently to the Compendium system once it has become available. Now, I know that this sounds already rather tangible, those 4 elements that we will be disposing of in December, but honestly, we are still some steps away from the practical application and the litmus test of this whole work. And that is what is coming next. So that is actually our plan for 2015, as we have now developed with Alfonso Sardi. So we want to start a practical application phase by first in-depth test running round with 4 or 5 member states. And these tests in states will, of course, then be facilitated by an expert from the Hertie School. In parallel, we will be working on a guidebook for policymakers, and that will be developed in an interactive manner between this testing round and the guidebook editors in order to make it just as relevant and practical as possible. And then thirdly, we plan, if all goes well, you never know, but if all goes well and the ambitions can be met, we want to launch the entire works at the occasion of the CDCPP plenary session, which will take place most probably in June 2016. And that's where the entire framework, the guidebook, will be launched and made available, and we will be inviting largely to that senior policymakers. So we want to go beyond the committee. There should be some senior policymakers, maybe some ministers, deputy ministers, state secretaries, and then, of course, the world of research, you, if you're interested, and then, of course, representatives of international bodies that may take a specific interest in these words. And then, depending on the outcome of that conference, and we expect that the conference will be happily launching those products, a work plan would be a result, and that work plan would then logically foresee the rollout of the system, of the indicator framework, to a larger number of member states, in line with 2 things: in line with the national interests, because everybody will find something of interest to the specific country, and of course in line with the Council of Europe priorities. To resume this project, there may be 3 potentials, specific potentials in it. One, of course, diagnostic, early warning. One, as always, assistance-oriented, so policy orientation, ministers or policy staff or researchers or whoever uses the system, it will be openly available, of course, may find specific answers to specific questions. And thirdly, monitoring. So as Alfonso has said earlier, there may be also contributions from that side to the, for instance, SG's annual report on the state of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Now, which dimensions should be most strongly be developed, we don't know yet. We have to see, and we will exactly be able to define this after the test rounds and once we have had the reactions by member states at the occasion of this larger conference next June. So this is not the moment now to embark on official commitments, but it's very, very clear, of course, to us that optimal links are to be set between the two systems. And synergies made, and that will only help with visibility for both instruments. So far, so good, and then, of course, we will have possibilities to discuss later on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kathrin. When it comes to culture, or rather the impact or impacts of culture, I think it's rather easy to kind of distinguish 4 mega trends. The first, obviously, is the economy of culture, or the economic contribution of culture. I know many people are already quite tired about that, because, of course, in our societies that seems to receive a kind of overwhelming amount of attention, but it's still important. Another one, completely different, are the well-being impacts of culture, the impact of culture on health and social well-being. Something that is gaining in importance, and the evidence base is growing basically every single day. The third is culture and development. Sarah mentioned to this, maybe I can say, rather unfortunate situation that culture was not clearly and explicitly included in the post-millennium development goals. What is development if it's not economic and social and well-being and health, democracy, human rights, and culture is as I'm describing these megatrends, these are exactly the things that culture contributes, and where we have a strong, solid evidence base already. But the fourth one, coming back to this indicator framework, is culture and democracy. Democracy is not indeed only that somebody goes to vote, let's say, once or a couple of times in 4 years. Democracy as the idea is to establish a platform where differences can be reconciled or somehow conciliated, and where everyone should be able to debate as equal and free agents. So that's what democracy basically is about. It's a very interesting form of governance, and I said in Linz in our Council of Europe conference that democracy is the most noble thing that humankind has ever invented, and I stick to that. Absolutely, it is. But democracy is under pressure. And so it looks like some of the facades of democracy are coming down pretty easily, and what we can see behind the facades is not so nice. And nevertheless, that means that the issue and discussion about democracy is coming up. The Council of Europe has and will have to have a key role there. And this kind of indicator framework, which was kind of extremely bold to embark on such an exercise. Can we actually establish a link between cultural participation and democratic participation, etc.? It seems to be possible. So I think this is one of the most important things that we have seen in the field of cultural policy in a long time. So this was too long. I wasn't supposed to make a presentation. We have a couple of minutes after relatively exhaustive sessions. Of course, you are dedicated people, you are dynamic people. If there are questions or comments or suggestions, the floor is now open to all of you. Please raise your hand. Oh, I see Ritva there. Yes.
Of course. Well, goodness, so many presentations, and I would like to make detailed question to all of you. But as Kathrin was the last one to talk, and it's a very interesting project. I'm very eager to see the results. But how do you see its future? Because now, again, we have invested a lot in a very, very sort of interesting enterprise, trying to prove that. Of course, it's a basic work. Council should do it anyway. It is part of the 3 pillars where Council lies. So what is the continuation and what is its linkage to Compendium work? And how all these different groups will work together in the future. And then to Vesna, I would like to say that Compendium Plus that is needed if we want to go to governance and really revise the chapter 5, because there are so many questions and so many laws which affect culture, but we haven't had the possibility to really look at the impact. And there is so much work that we could have 10 researchers in each country and we would get a fantastic system. But we can discuss that later in the working groups. Okay, but Kathrin and Kimmo, because you are both involved very much in culture and democracy.
Maybe we should take another question because I see Dorothy.
Yes, I would like also to congratulate Kathrin. Now my question can only be, what are the 5 countries which you've chosen for your first experiment? It's fantastic work, but also I would like to comment Heretiana observations on the cultural policies compendium. And of course, I think that many national experts very easily agree with you that there is not much about the outcome of cultural policies in our countries. But it can't be, because the monitoring system of outcomes of cultural policies, for example, in my country, doesn't exist at all. There is nothing like monitoring and analyzing outcomes. It is only accountancy. It is only counting funding, how much was spent, how many people were supported, and nothing like the real analysis. What was the final result? Then, I'm researcher, and I can't very easily say, okay, let's improve it. Let's write something on the outcome. Outcome need system and in-depth analysis. We can't just answer very easily, okay, now we will improve the compendium and we will give you the outcome. It is simply impossible if you would love to do it seriously. And okay. And ending with Kimmo, I think that we should first think once more about what David Frosby said, that culture is like a precondition of sustainable development. So it's impossible to live and without culture.
Yeah. A footnote by Andreas, and then I also saw Mikko asking for a comment, and unfortunately then we will have to stop this round. Now the footnote.
My footnote is, as usual, anarchistic, and I would like to comment on many things, but I will only take Heretiana and report a bit on an incident I had when visiting the World Summit in Johannesburg of IFACA, because we also had the topic of diversity there high on the agenda. And then someone from Africa, South Africa, approached me and said, well, for us it was very difficult to actually cope with that notion, because first of all we thought it's a trick again by the apartheid people to drive us apart again, you know, this whole issue of cultural diversity. That was my footnote.
Yes, thank you for your presentations, and my comment is partly for everybody and partly the same as Dorota says, that because I think all of you were actually talking about the output part, and really it's quite a different task than doing cultural policy analysis to discuss the output. I should say that there is one piece in the compendium reports that really is about the output, and that is the chapter 8 on participation. So there you have some output, but I think it's very difficult to otherwise cope with this issue. But then, Kathrin, I must say that this indicators, so I'm very sure that you find correlations, but I mean correlation is not causal relationship.
That's what Anheuser would always first remind. But correlation is correlation. It doesn't necessarily explain why this happened, but it says that it happens. Yeah.
I mean, working in culture and dealing with statistics, Mikko, you know very well that we don't necessarily always look for causal relations. we are also very happy about all kinds of other effects and network effects and descriptive explanations. And Anhaya and his team, they're very serious. I mean, they're doing this annual governance report. I don't know whether any of you has had a chance to look at that product. It's of course online available and as a publication. They do it for many years with different thematic foci, and this is highly inspiring. And when we saw the way their annual governance reports are shaped, they're global reports, they're dealing with the world, and you have got data, and you've got an online tool to explore and analyze yourself on the basis of this tool. We understood that, of course, none of these data are necessarily causally related, and yet they have a very intelligent analytical report drawn up on the various aspects, and it's all about governance and democracy, and then various issues, as I said before. So as an ex-statistician, I'm not hunting here after causal relationships. Of course, I would love to find them, but if I don't find them, I'm not unhappy either, because I'm working in culture. So we'll see how we go, and this would also be my reply to Ritva. Of course, Ritva is a tough manager and has been all through her life, so she already now wants to know how exactly we link up these things and what it will look like and who benefits what, how much. I'm sorry, I cannot tell you right at this very moment. Next summer, next spring, we will know more. And of course, even during the development of the online tool, which is now in the pre-conception phase, we will, of course, and through Andreas, we are very closely interlinked, and we're looking to making sure that there is space for utmost synergy. Links on the various systems will be the smallest. It could go further, we have to see. Then my reply also with regards to the 5 countries, Dorothy, you asked that. We don't yet have them, but we will be taking a decision on that very soon at the occasion of a forthcoming bureau meeting of the committee, which is next week, I think. 2 weeks' time. And we are planning to select those 5 countries from our bureau members. And that's the easiest, and that's a kind of a natural solution. Otherwise, we would have to go into a huge consultation round with 47 member states, plus 3 other signatories to the European Cultural Convention, 50 states, consultation, timeframes. No, I mean, this would be really delaying the process. The 9, I'll tell you later on. I don't have them all on. Yeah. There is a geographic representation, of course, as always there is. So then there's one really important thing, and I forgot it, and I apologize for that. When it comes to these indicators on culture and democracy, I want to and have to thank really wholeheartedly the European Cultural Foundation in Amsterdam and the Erste Foundation in Austria, who are also financially partnering and supporting these works, which would not have been possible, of course, on the small allocations available in the ordinary budget of the Council of Europe. So this is most welcome, and we are trying to extend the partnership also to include the European Union very soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to everyone. It's time to wrap up this. And of course, I'm not trying to repeat or summarize what was said. Instead, I'd like to share what actually I heard, what I felt. And that was a group of esteemed colleagues who all demonstrated their commitment to these respective projects. They were describing a very strong sense of ownership and belief in such information tools and their application to come up with positive results. That's what I hear, and that's always what I hear in the Compendium authors meetings, and I think that is probably the one single most important message. So I hope we can all retain that. And now half an hour coffee break, and I believe we will be continuing in the same space after that. Thank you so much.